Hey, everybody, welcome to Module 6. I want to again just say that you guys are doing a great job, and I'm seeing so much great work from you guys. So let's go ahead and keep it up as we get toward the end of the semester. Module 6 is titled Researching the Conversation. And this is a really important unit because not only is it going to set you up for the final paper, the argumentative paper, but I think this is a skill that so many people just kind of try to gloss over, right? Like you get this assignment, you have to have 3 sources or 5 sources, a source, whatever. And you grab one and you kind of just grab something out of it, right? And away you go. The real question is, do you really know that you have the best sources? Do you really have a solid understanding of the topic? And do you really know how to use that source effectively? I will get a lot of times where people will pull a quote out of a source and there's no context, there's no explanation, there's no demonstration of understanding what that source says, right? And so as a reader, as an audience, you have to question, like, do they really know what this is, right? Does this really help that paper? And I think that's always a question you should be asking yourself. How does this support my paper? How does this support my argument? How does this build more trust with my audience? So to get to that point, this unit, we're going to look about researching the conversation and really trying to get you to a place where you know what that source is saying and how you can use it and how it's going to support your argument. So if we look here, here's our assigned tasks and our assignments for this module and our learning objectives. And then let's just go ahead and look right at the paper that we're going to be writing. Now, this is writing project number 3, the argumentative paper. And now this one, actually, we're going to do over 3 modules. Okay, so in the past, you wrote the half draft, and then the next week you turn in the final draft. This one's going to take 3 weeks or 3 modules to get to, right? Just kind of keep that in the back of your mind that this does stretch out over a little bit, okay? What is the argumentative essay? So realistically, what we are looking at is a strong, definitive position on a topic, and then you back it up, okay? So taking all of our different readings that we've had and in that broad general discussion of the role of food in society and what it says about us, find a topic that you want to really promote and argue, okay? And we want you to have a very clear position on it. From there, you're going to use sources, both it could be some of your sources could be what we use, the rest of them, and some of them have to be from other outside of our class readings. But you're going to pull in these other sources and you're going to back up your claim. Okay, back that up. We'll talk more about that as we go along. This gives you kind of that overview of it. Obviously, you have that really strong thesis statement, right? I believe this. I say this. This is where I stand on this issue. The introduction gets our attention and introduces that thesis. It sets that tone. And then the argument is where you really defend your argument, right? You really defend it. You have to explain the problem, and then you have to be very clear about how you got to that position and why it's a valid point, right? So you're going to provide evidence that proves, demonstrates, and supports that claim. Remember, that is going to be key because you're asking your audience to buy into something that you're saying, right? Like you're going to pitch this position and you're asking the audience to feel the same way and to buy into what you're saying. So you really have to use sources that bring that up, right? In module 7 is where we're going to do that half draft. So we'll talk more about this paper as we get closer. But keep in mind that as you're doing your research and as you're looking for your sources, the central question you have to be asking yourself, how will this help my paper? How will this help my thesis? How will it help build that trust with that audience? The final draft then will be due on module 8. And again, be careful and watch the calendar dates as we get into module 8 because that's a shorter module. And so the due date actually comes forward a little bit. Let's take a quick look at our closed theme reading background check-in. Again, we're asking you to pull one of the background readings from the class and to be able to say, okay, here's what I have, here's what I see, here's what I understand. And in your submission, then tell us about, you know, how you see this fitting into your argument, right? So you're going to pick one of these questions, and then you're going to kind of just briefly explore how that helps you develop your thesis. Now, in the past, you've just been reading, different articles and just kind of dipping in and out of things. For this one, I would really suggest that it's one that really is going to click in on your topic and what you plan on addressing. One of the next big things we're going to be doing is some instruction about the library databases. And I know that you could go to Google and type in a question and get an answer and get thousands of sources, right? Like you could get thousands of sources. I get that. I totally do. But the question is always going to be, how do you know that that's a valid source? How do you know that's a reputable source, right? Some are going to be obvious, some aren't. And you really have to be very careful about that. Well, if you use the library databases, that's taken off the table for you. That's already done, right? And so that's an awesome kind of thing to be thinking about and to be able to utilize. So we have some instruction about how to use the library databases. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to agree with everything they say, right? Like, though, you can disagree with the point, you can argue the point, whatever. That's fine. But the source itself is valid, and so you can trust that, right? So I think that's a really good item for you to be able to tap into. I also like them because there's a lot of tools in there to help you save them or print them or deliver those sources to you. You can read them right on the screen. And it has a citation generator built in. So like already they're cited. So you have a lot of tools that you can really tap into. For this one, there is actually a exercise that goes along with this about using the database, right? So it's going to ask you to go get a source and walk through some questions with that. So definitely, again, I would suggest that you want to find a source that's going to be applicable to your paper and what you want to do. Let's take a look at this week's discussion board. Again, I really am impressed with what you guys have been doing on the database, on the discussion boards. I'm starting to see a lot of you answering, 4, 5, 6 replies. That's awesome. I'm seeing a lot of you getting into the habit of posting on multiple days. Again, that's awesome because that is what you need to do. That is what you need to do to be able to get those full points and to really participate in the discussion board. So what you're going to do is, for this post, you're going to do, again, the initial post. You're going to reply to, you're going to create a new post and select either the background information from inside the class or one of the sources that you have that you found. Okay. So you can use one of ours or one of yours. It doesn't matter. Again, make sure it's one that you're using for this paper. And then explain the angles or problems you're interested in pursuing in response to this question. Okay. And what does that mean? Like when you look at this source and it talks about diet, what about that diet are you really wanting to dig into? How is this going to really help you form your question? How does this fit into your larger argument? So you're basically going to be introducing us to this article and showing us how you're going to be able to utilize that. And then again, you're going to go in, you're going to respond to at least 2 of your classmates. It is better if you respond to more of them. Don't forget that we want to post your initial, we want to have your initial post up early in the week so that people have a lot of different options to respond to. It does give you some options on how to respond. The biggest key for this one is going to be about how you see this source aiding in that paper. How do you think this source will help that writer argue their point, right? And so really think about it in those terms. And then finally, we are going to get to the mini annotated bibliography. And I think this is so important because, again, I think a lot of times if you're not forced to do it, you go out, you grab a source, you grab a line, you stick it in your paper, and you're done. And so many times people don't get a full appreciation of the source. And because they don't have a full appreciation of the source, they might not use it correctly. For instance, there's an old book. Robert M. Pirsig wrote the book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. It was a book about an executive who was on a motorcycle trip with his son. They were going to climb a mountain in Montana, and he was wrestling with the question of what is quality. And the book starts off with his definition. This is what I believe quality is. As he is on his trip, and as him and his son make this journey across the country, he starts to revise that, and he starts to redevelop it, and he starts to extend it and expand it, so that the definition he gives at the end is different than the definition he gives at the beginning. And it shows a lot of maturity and development in his position. It's not that it's just worded differently. It like has a lot of different concepts. And I think sometimes if we don't know what's in the source, or we don't take the time to actually read the full source and put it in context with other sources, we don't always have the ability to pull out the best information. And so what we have is the mini annotated bibliography. And so what you're going to do is you are going to write 2 short annotated bibliography, okay, similar to what they show you in the book. And then what you're going to do then is you are going to summarize and then evaluate that, okay? So, and I'll put it right here of what you're going to do. So you're going to summarize that source. Here's the source. Here's what's in it. Here's what it's about. Here's what it's talking about. And then this is what I think of it. This is where I think its strengths are, where its weaknesses are, how I might be able to use it, why it is credible, right? And I really always tell people on these types of assignments to consider them as sales pitches. Like, how would you convince somebody else that this is a good source? So obviously the summary, right? That's going to be a paragraph where you explain what that source is all about, what its main points are, how it, covered the topic. But then that evaluation is really where you sell it. Like, why is this a good source? Why is this a valid source? What makes it useful in my paper? And so you want to think about it in that respect. All right. Hey, as we start to wrap up the semester, we're getting close to the end. Again, I do want to remind you to please keep that focus. Please keep that drive. You guys are doing great work. I've been impressed with the stuff I'm seeing. The dedication and the type of work that you guys are doing, and you guys are staying up to speed. That's awesome. Keep that up. I know it gets a little bit more difficult now that the weather's starting, maybe to change a little bit, or maybe, you like, oh, I'm feeling really good about my grades. I'm feeling good about where I'm at, and I got another week, and it's really easy to let things go, right? And so definitely make sure you're continuing to push on this. Don't suffer in silence. If you have any questions, make sure you're reaching out to me so that I can answer those for you. And a lot of you have done that, and that is awesome. Reminder that the email is the best approach so that I can answer that question at any time. And if you do have a question, please be specific in what you are asking for so that I can answer it with what you need. So with that, good luck, everybody, on Module 6.